everybody, and welcome to this week's Writers Chat. This is the place where writers like to gather together. We talk about all things writing for writers and by writers, and we are so happy to see everybody today. And thank you if you've taken the time to join us on the replay. We know quite a few of you watch us on the replay. My name's Jean Wise. I'm one of the co-hosts, and I'm joined by Johnny Alexander, our other co-hosts. Today, our friend Bethany is off traveling around, and so she won't be with us today, but we got 2 out of the 3. There we go. And we've got a wonderful guest today to talk about writing contests. So I'm going to turn it over to Johnny to introduce a guest that I think most of you know. So we'll turn it over to Johnny. Go ahead, Johnny.
We're very excited to have Victoria Duerstock back with us. Vicki is just a phenomenal person, and I don't want to just, read her bio, though it's a very well written bio. So I do encourage you to go to her website and see that. Vicki and I met, I think it's Blue Ridge Mountain Christian Writers Conference a few years ago, and then she got very involved with Serious Writer, and so we got to spend more time together that way, which has been really fun. She is absolutely phenomenal. She knows how to do growth on Twitter like nobody's business, and teaches do you teach a class on that, Vicki, on Serious Writer? Or is it Instagram growth on Instagram?
I do. The first class I taught on Serious Writer Academy was Explode Your Growth on Twitter.
Yeah. And she has a book out, which Jeannie's going to hold up for everybody because it's just absolutely gorgeous. Heart and Home, Design Basics for Your Soul and Living Space. And I don't think it's really a sequel, but a companion book to it, Heart and Home for Christmas, Celebrating Joy in Your Living Space, will be coming out in
September 17th.
Very soon, just a couple weeks. Yeah, Jeannie, show a couple of those papers. And we could just talk about this book because it is absolutely gorgeous.
It is a gorgeous book. It is a gorgeous.
Photos.
Thank you.
Did you take the photos, Vicki, or how did all that? Let's just spend a couple minutes talking about this book.
Oh, I'd love to.
Contest.
Schmontest.
We'll learn from you. We just want to learn from
you. So the books have a variety of pictures that have been sourced. My husband's been in the furniture industry for over 20 years. He does wall art and mirrors and lamps and things. So he has access to all these beautiful things, and we go to markets and things like that all the time. Practically our whole married life has been wrapped up in the furniture and design industry. And so it was a natural thing to be able to find nice photos, but we did hire a photographer to take some interior shots. One of my sweet friends that I met because of this book, I had not met her before. I asked to take pictures of her house before she and I were even friends. That's an awkward conversation. I know you don't know me, but can I take pictures of your home? Yes, so we hired a photographer, and she just has a beautiful home for taking interior photographs. And so he took a lot of those shots. And then I met a lot of interior design ladies who blog, lifestyle bloggers and things on Instagram. And I just started sending messages out and saying, hey, I'm working on this project, and I think you would be a perfect fit. You love talking about your faith on Instagram, but you also have these beautiful pictures that you post, and here's my idea, and what do you think? And I probably sent out maybe 75, 80 messages. I was just hitting a bunch of people. And I only had 30 days to put that book together. So, it was a lot going on at one time. But the outcome was that 9 of them said yes to the first book and sent me pictures. So there's pictures in there from other people who contributed. And the Christmas volume that's coming out next month, actually, I added about 6 more people. And so there's 15 different ladies that are involved in that project as well.
Oh, how wonderful. And what a great way to build a little street team, too.
Yeah, if I had been smarter, I would have done that with intention. Yeah. But I didn't the fact, and I was like, oh, that was really smart.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, congratulations, because I remember when you were, kind of going through the throes of that very, very quickly, and it was it was a lot to do, but it's just a beautiful, beautiful book. And you got to meet the Property Brothers as well.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah. And Jane Seymour, that was a lot of fun.
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
I've seen that photo too. That's really, really cool.
But it's a beautiful book,
It is.
too. Beautifully written. I mean, the devotions in that are just great. And Cheryl Lynn just commented, you need your own show. You could probably do one right on HGTV.
It would be called the Hot Mess Express, I'm pretty sure.
Well, yeah, Vicky's very busy. Vicky is an entrepreneur. She's raised her children to be entrepreneurs. They've got their hands in all kinds of things, including Serious Writer Coffee. Well, their coffee company is called Cool Chicks Coffee. Oh, yes, I got it right. Cool Chicks Coffee. But there's a Serious Writer blend. So, you can get that from Vicky. But we're here today to talk about contests. Vicky's been the contest coordinator for Serious Writer since the get-go. So lots of contests. So, the different writers conferences have contests. And then, of course, there was the big contest, Writer of the Year, Book of the Year, that involved a trip to New York. So she's here to talk to us about contests, why we should enter them, how we should enter them, just all the inside secrets from, her role as being a coordinator for some major contests. So Vicki, take it away.
Well, thanks so much for having me today. I appreciate it. Talking about contests is fun for me because this has been an interesting side of being on contests. And I've been on the other side, and I've entered contests, and I'm still entering contests, and I don't win all of them. And so, it's one of those things. I'm a very competitive person, so I always anticipate winning. And so, that's always the goal, right? You enter a contest, you want to win. And when you don't, you kind of, especially as a creative person, because I've been in music for a long time now, I'm, doing writing and things like that. As a creative person, you kind of start to overanalyze, what did I do wrong? Did I not, am I terrible at this? Should I give up on my dream? Those are the things that happen a lot of times with contests. And so, it can be hard. It's like a two-edged sword, right? If you win, you think, oh yes, I'm great and I'm going to get published. And if you don't win, you think, oh no, I'm terrible and I'll never get published. And so it's really kind of a balance somewhere in between, because I've lost quite a few contests, and I've placed in others. And so it's not all or nothing. I guess that would be the biggest thing I would like to encourage everybody with this morning is all contests are subjective. And that is always based on the judges. And that's why we try to make sure we rotate judges throughout all the Serious Writer contests. So, if Johnny judges fiction for us, at one point, we try not to have her judge every single, romantic category for, the next 4 contests, because we want to be able to have a variety, especially if more than one of you enter more than one contest at a time. Yeah. And so there is always moving judges.
I just think the thing that you shared a minute ago about even you as a seasoned contest coordinator have experienced those ups and downs and the losses. I hate to celebrate you having losses, but I find that just encouraging because, you lose a couple of them. You think, I'm not going to bother entering another one. You do it. It can be discouraging that way. So I appreciate your observation about it being how subjective it can be.
That's a lesson, I had to deal with early on, and it doesn't make it any easier, but, even as a child, doing piano contests, right? You'd go in and you'd compete and you'd have prepared and worked hard and memorized and done all the work, and then you walk away and you didn't win. That can be really debilitating. You either let that conquer you and you don't continue, or you have to kind of put a perspective on it that, I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
But I like your analogy to the music industry, because if I remember right, we had a show that you even sang for us, didn't you, on a Writer's Chat a long time ago? I remember
that was an after party.
Yeah, but it was fun. She's got a beautiful voice, but. It's almost like they say, the pianist has to practice and practice and practice. And this is a form of practice for us, practicing something that is beneficial in our industry. So can you talk a little bit about what are some of the benefits for entering writing contests?
Well, I think that's a great segue, Jean, to what I was just thinking about in my mind. So I'm not sure how you did that, because that's kind of scary. But what I was thinking earlier is what a good testing ground for us for ideas a lot of times, whether they're going to get traction or not. And of course, if it's a contest that you don't get feedback on, that's challenging because all you know is win or lose or placement. You don't get any other feedback. Some contests offer feedback. You usually pay a little bit higher price. You get a critique back and they give you some feedback as far as where that goes. So it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to get feedback on an idea, you may want to make sure that you enter a contest where you'll get that information back. But the other thing to consider is most of our categories, and we have rubrics. This may be interesting for folks that don't know how the judging happens. We do have rubrics for Serious Writer contests that are based on numbers 1 to 10, and there's at least 8 to 10 different criteria that each entry goes through, and each category, each genre has its own rubric. So they're all different. But some carry the same thing. So, each one is going to say, is the punctuation and grammar and spelling, on point, or is there room for improvement? Does the book have a hook? Is there a unique idea? And is the writing good? In fiction, you're going to have good dialogue. So these are all really this is what makes good writing, in general. So when you're trying to submit a proposal, you're trying to make those entries the same way. The entries that go in the contest should be just exactly like what you would try to enter for, getting a book published. So it's great practice. I think it's wonderful practice because it really makes you sit and think about, what is, my hook? What is my unique idea? And am I communicating that quickly? Some of the bigger book categories, you can get up to 15 pages in there. But the reality is the judge may make a decision pretty quick, and especially some of the judges that have done this a really long time, they're going to know. And I know Johnny can speak to that. You're going to know within the first page or two if things are going to be okay or not. And if it takes them 5 to get into it, it's probably not going to win, because there's so much more that could be done at the front. And I've had the same feedback on my fiction. I wanted my first fiction that I wrote, my novel, was crime suspense. And I wanted to really give you all the historical background and the travel and all the stuff they did before we got to the crime suspense in the middle, right? And I had so many people say, what genre is this?
Yeah.
No, really, it's coming. But yeah, I mean, Johnny, you've said that to me before. We've talked about this. That if it doesn't happen right away, if there's not something to grab your attention, it is going to get kind of read through quickly, or maybe not rank as high as somebody else who may have that really instantaneous quality first page.
Wow. I so agree as a judge, and just going, I've just got so many things I want to say, but so it is subjective. I mean, I totally agree with that. But the rubrics in I think almost every contest I've ever judged, and I've done for Serious Writer, I've done for American Christian Fiction Writers Genesis contest, I've done for a couple other smaller groups too. So I've judged a lot, and those rubrics do help to give some objectivity to it. And I mean, because I know even in the Serious Writer, and this happened maybe a year or so ago, I try to do my scoring and be very, very fair with that. And the story I liked best, I think, was 1 point or 2 points lower than the story that I had scored higher. And and I will tell you, there is that little moment where you're going, oh, I could adjust this, and I didn't do it because that just wouldn't have been right. But there's so there is that. Those rubrics do help give some objectivity to it, and there are just certain things. And Vicki is so right that it may not seem fair that someone can judge just 5 pages, but I can tell you, even when there's 15 pages to the entry, and I will read all 15 pages, but there may come a time when I start skimming, because by the first 3 or 4 pages, I do kind of have a very good idea of how this is going to go. So,
That's great insight to have.
reality.
Yeah, that is. Well, Vicki, there's a lot of chat in the chat room about categories.
Okay.
And how you best decide, and sometimes they overlap a little bit, and so they've been doing a lot of sharing on that. So, but maybe give us your perspective on categories. I think they vary in contests, don't they?
They do vary for each contest, and Sears Writer tries to kind of keep the same categories through each contest just for continuity. And there are times where we'll have a ton of entries in one category and maybe just a couple in another category, and so they have to get kind of merged together. That doesn't mean they get judged against each other. It just means that the overall winners come from this more collective group, based on scoring. And so when you're picking a category, you do the best you can. I know sometimes we like to have our cross, my historical, time travel, might fit into like 4 different categories. So, I mean, my options there are enter it in all 4 and see if it'll place, because that's a possibility, or just pick the one, or pick general. Usually there's a kind of a collective category that you could put it in and see. I've had some folks tell me they've had some feedback from even their one-on-one appointments when they've had critiques or whatever, that people have told them to change genres. So that's sometimes a good place where you can get some feedback on what genre to enter it. But with Sears Writer, if you enter it in a category and it's not supposed to be there, a judge usually lets me know. They'll say, this isn't in the right category, and we'll move it. There's no points off. There's no, you don't get disqualified. We're just going to move it. We're going to get it into the right place so it can be judged correctly.
Well,
and I can't say that's what everybody else does. I just know that's our policy. And, I'm also, as far as policies go, I'm a huge rule stickler. Like, if you don't, your margin, I'm like, check, because I'm a rule follower. And early on, I was like, well, we said, if they didn't do this, then we were going to cut them. And, everybody on the team was like, no. I was like, what? We're rule followers. What happens is you still get entered. You don't get disqualified. We do need you to follow certain rules, because if you put your name in a header, that means I've got to go in and edit it all, because these contest entries are judged blindly. When the judge gets them, they get number 1, number 2, number 3 in the titles. They don't actually see anybody's names on them. And so I've got to go in and make all those edits. That's just a lot more time for me before I can send it out to a judge. And so it is helpful when you follow the rules. And it's a good practice to be in to follow the rules, because not everybody would still let things come in, even if it doesn't follow the rules.
That's a good tip right there, I would think, and stuff. Well,
read guidelines. I'm sorry, I just say, whatever contest it is, read the guidelines and follow them just as much as you can. Yes.
I would say read and reread them.
Yeah,
several times.
I agree.
On that way. Where do you find writers contests anyway? You know what I mean? Is there a good source in it?
I brought video aids here.
Yay!
Okay. I get certain magazine subscriptions. Like this one is Poets and Writers.
Mm-hmm.
They have a big section in the back with deadlines, and it's all contests. They have grants. They have recent winners. Almost every single magazine that comes in has those. That whole section in the back. Now this is an older market guide, but the market guides have a whole section in the back on contests. So, I still use my older ones, because I'll go in and say, okay, well, this was the website. Let me go in and see what the updated information is online. So I just use it as kind of my resource to get me going in the right direction. And the other writer's guide, this one, the bigger one, has the same thing. It's a huge section back here of contests. And I recently entered a contest that I didn't know anything about, but someone had emailed me. Michelle Medlock Adams emailed me, and she said, oh, you should enter this contest. And I was like, oh, okay. I didn't even know it existed, So I was like, okay, let me do that.
It seems like more and more writers' conferences are sponsoring contests, too.
Yeah, they do.
And I know Word Weavers, I was in Word Weavers for a long time, and they have contests with their conferences and their retreats and things. And so, usually you have to be a member of Word Weavers to be able to do their contests. I know that was the case when I was there. And, that's another thing. Serious Writer doesn't make you attend the conference. You don't have to be there. You don't have to be a member of anything. You can just enter, which is kind of nice.
Yeah. Do you think winning some contests, how does that help us as a writer? I mean, does that really help promote in our proposals, or what do you think about? Probably Kyle's about the best example, and because he won so much.
Well, Kyle, Bethany, and Michelle, they've been able to leverage their wins really well, and especially the story, of how that actually propelled them forward. I think for me, contests are just that shot in the arm, and even the losses are the shot in the arm, to do better, to figure it out. There's a mystery here that I haven't solved, and I need to get in here and figure out what it is. And while it can still be subjective, I just didn't hit the right judge yet, well, eventually I will. Maybe eventually I'll find somebody that's really excited about what I'm going to do. So there's this motivation that happens. And when there's wins, of course, sometimes we just need that validation, right? I mean, it is a bit of validation to say, yeah, you're on the right track. You have a good idea. You have good writing. Whatever it is, you can take that away and say, okay, there's a good thing here. But I've heard from quite a few people that editors do watch at the different publishing houses. They do watch to see who the winners are, and contact agents later or contact authors later about that particular project. And they do end up, many times, those projects end up getting picked up.
I have a couple stories along that line. American Christian Fiction Writers, of course, has the huge fiction Genesis contest, which I was, humbled and blessed to win in, 2011, I think, with Where Treasure Hides. And it was because of that, an editor was the judge, and then it got published. So it does happen. And then I also know a story of a friend who had entered the contest, and before the winners were announced, an agent contacted the coordinator of the contest because she wanted to be in touch with this certain entry, because she wanted to talk about representation even before it had gone all the way through, because she had judged it and seen it and wanted to be in contact. So, you just don't know how things might happen, but these things won't happen if you don't even try.
Well, that makes me curious about who are judges. We know Johnny's been a judge, and she's coming from a writer and probably editor point of view, but are agents judges, for example?
They are in the ACFW sometimes, and that's the only one I really know about, because there's like 3 levels. And so the first level is just a lot of, people who may be published writers, may not be, may just, be just volunteer to do it. But as the higher up you go, the more narrow that becomes, and by the time you get to that last level, it's editors and agents who are judging those final rounds in the American Christian Fiction Writers Contest. Yeah.
So in general, the judges that I recruit and beg to help me out when I'm doing contests are professionals, always, or sometimes we'll pull some readers in too. People who just love to read, people who are avid readers. So there'll be a variety. And sometimes if we have enough time, we'll pass it around from one judge to the next and let a couple people, give feedback on those. That happened with the big award contest, the Serious Writer Award, the Writer of the Year, and the Book of the Year awards. They went through multiple rounds of judges. And so the conference contest is a little different. The Right to Publish contests that we help facilitate are also done not with readers. It's always people that are industry professionals. So it's usually agents or authors who have probably done more than one, book, and people who are editors. So they're a little bit different each time.
Would it help a writer to be a judge? Do you think?
I think it helps me. I mean, I love to sit back. I'll do this sometimes. Like, I don't get to read all of them all the time. It just depends on how big the contests are. But I love to kind of read through entries and think through, you know, different things that I would maybe improve or change or how I would judge it if it was me. And then, you know, send them off to somebody else to judge and then get them back and see where I kind of lined up with the judge. And so it's always interesting because it does help me kind of know, oh yeah, you know, I was on the right track or I really missed that one. You know, like,
I think it helps too, because especially if you're having to provide feedback, which when you judge the ACFW contest, I believe if you give a score lower, like theirs are 1 through 5. And I think if you give anything less than a 4, you have to justify it. You have to actually write out why. And I mean, so you have to think about that. You know, you have to think about, why am I giving this person not a 4 or a 5? Why am I giving it a 3? And kind of justify it. But it is to provide that feedback, because that's part of what these, you know, when you enter that contest, you are paying to have that feedback given. So I mean, yeah, as a writer, because it's just the same as being part of a critique group though. Like when you're saying, oh, I don't like this sentence, you can't just say I don't like the sentence. You have to say what about it, you know. And I think that does make you a stronger writer, because we tend to write, speaking for myself, I guess, I tend to write a lot intuitively. And when I read, kind of the same thing, and I'll say, I know there's something wrong here. What is it? Well, especially starting out, it's like, okay, beginning to identify what it is and being objective about what it is, rather than just, you know, tossing it out. Yeah.
And that's sort of what Annette said in the chat there, that she's learned so much through critiquing her partners in their group's writing that she now offers professional critique. So she would think judging would be incredible because of the feedback you give too, you know, and I think that's a truth, you know, a lot of truth there.
That was one of the things we learned early on when I was, you know, when I was getting my master's degree in education, was if you can't teach it, you don't really understand it. So like one of the ways to really figure out if you understand, you know, the different things that you're trying to, is could you teach that to somebody else who has no idea what you're talking about? And, you know, there were times when I would teach a piano lesson with rhythm, you know, that if I didn't work out the rhythm in advance, I certainly couldn't teach it to somebody else because it was complicated. And the same thing has held true. You know, we've homeschooled for years. And so when I want to make sure that one of the kids really knew what they were doing, I'd have them teach the other ones, you know, so that I could really measure their understanding of the concepts. And I think that that's kind of the same thing that we're doing when we're judging or critiquing. We're trying to say, yeah, we understand these concepts and this is what we're really looking for versus what we have in front of us. Or this was really what I was looking for. And, you know, every now and then we'll get entries back that have perfect scores. Like they get a perfect 100. And that's always incredible because you say, you know, that person really hit the mark on every single category. And so they're obviously a clear winner.
Okay.
Very rarely from me, though.
You don't want to ask for Johnny to be your judge. Did you pick up that tip, group? Good stuff. Well, I would think if you'd have a judge that would always give 10s, for example, you know.
Yeah, they couldn't be our judge for too long unless we just let them be a secondary, you know, or a first judge and then had a secondary gatekeeper like Johnny.
Yeah. I would think you would need some fine tuning.
I do give out perfect scores, but really, I really have to think about that before I do it. I don't do it just willy-nilly.
On that one. Well, I'm curious, you know, it seems like I'm seeing more and more contests charge for entry. And that is a little bit discouraging because that starts costing a lot of money too. And then plus you have to send the book in or whatever and stuff. Can you talk a little bit about that? Why did groups start going to charging and what's a reasonable fee?
Well, I mean, there is time and overhead involved, and especially with actual books that have to get to judges versus digital files per se, you're going to have shipping costs that are going to have to get sent out. There's the certificates or the medals or the, you know, the winning things, and, you know, the Serious Writer medals are, you know,
They're huge.
the big plates, you know, and stickers, you know, that the winners get for their books. And so there's a lot of costs. And then on top of that, it's just time. I mean, there's time involved in a lot of times for what I have to do is, you know, get all the entries in, make sure there's payments for all of the entries, you know, match all that up on my little spreadsheet, and then go back in and make sure that, you know, I take out all the names or addresses, you know, or whatever's on those cover sheets, you know, that need to be taken off of before they're sent to the judge, coordinate with the judge when I need to get the entries and the rubrics back, you know, so there's a lot of coordination that goes on. I have not sat down to count up hours because I probably not like the count up of how many hours.
You spend more hours than what you.
Yes, because even when you get back from a conference, you still have to send out the ones that didn't, you know, that you didn't give away. There's Johnny's medal.
I went the very first year, and this is for a published book already, but yeah, look how huge this is. I no longer am eligible to enter this contest, so I don't anymore, but this was our very, very first one, so I was not on the board yet, and I got to do it. So I did, and Where Treasure Hides won. So these are the Serious Writer medals. Do you guys still give them out this big?
We do. They are now our signature medals. I mean, you know, go big or go home.
Exactly.
Wow.
So yeah, I mean, I think that at the end of the day, the money that's charged is for the overhead. Now, I just entered a contest, the one Michelle told me about, and it was $95 for me to enter.
Wow.
Not a $20 entry. So, you know, there's a big range in pricing, and I feel like we do a good job of keeping our costs down as much as we can. I know the one big award that we do yearly now, the Writer of the Year and Book of the Year, those folks came to New York City. We did some special things for them. So based on the prize package, your entry is probably going to be more expensive, as well as the time involved. And we did have many more judges involved and much more time shipping things back and forth. So that's where all that money goes to. Eventually, you know, we have big dreams, you know, of what we want to do personally for our contest. But I do know, I think Rhonda mentioned it, some places use that money and put it towards scholarships for other people to be able to attend. And Serious Writer does do a lot of that as well. So
that really explains it. I appreciate that, because I think some people question that and wonder.
Sure. Absolutely. I mean, it would be nice if they were free, but there is time involved and coordination that has to happen, and especially if it's done well. And I don't think, personally, I don't think you should do it if you're not going to do it well.
That's right. I agree. And, you know, I think, too, just having a fee helps weed out people sometimes, too. I mean, you could get a lot more entries if they were free that are just not up to snuff entries at all, because people would just be throwing stuff out there.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, it's that principle of investment, right? If I get something for free, I don't necessarily put all the time and effort into it that I would if I had to pay even a smaller amount, you know, or that I would, you know, we just have a more personal tie-in whenever we have to contribute a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's stuff. Is there a bias against self-published books being entered as far as traditionally published? What do you think?
I have not seen a bias in the contest that I've been the director of, but I would say that some of the other times I look at winners in other contests, I don't see a lot of self-published books.
Yeah, that's kind of what I've seen as a trend, and I just wondered, and it could be the quality. It hasn't gone through as much editing maybe as traditional publishing. And
sometimes covers can be giveaways, you know, and sometimes a cover, especially of a book that's been self-published, doesn't always look exactly the same next to another book that's traditionally published. It's just the difference of the two sometimes.
I think the ACFW contest that, I'm not sure about this, but I think to enter like for the one for the published books, which is the Carroll Awards, that you have to meet certain, they call it a qualified independent publisher or something, and you have to have had so many dollars worth of sales in so much of a time period or something like that, so again they feel like they're getting a quality book being entered by someone who's really put some time and effort into it.
Yeah. There's some talk in the chat about, are the scores available to the authors?
For serious writer contests? No.
Yeah. Okay.
And the reason for that is just that would be a lot more time involved in trying to distribute those. Because after contests, we also send out the certificates. We make sure to post on the social media sites, who the winners are. We try to get contest graphics out for each person, so there's a lot of multiple things going on, and adding one more thing to kind of accumulate the scores and get those out. We're not staffed. I mean, it's me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of a double-edged sword too, because like when I was doing, I was a coordinator of a category for the Genesis contest for 3 or 4 different years, and I would see the scores. I actually had to keep Excel sheets, of the scores, so I could say who was the top 10 to move on and who was the top 3 to move on. And what some of you are saying, like you'll get, and I've had this happen too to me, you get 2 judges just love your stuff and 1 judge just knock your average off. And I saw this happen again and again and again. And it kind of would be the other way too. Like 2 people really didn't like the entry and 1 person thought it was fabulous. And it was really interesting then how maybe this had happened before. Like, so I had the top 10, but the people that made the top 3 were at the bottom of the top 10. They weren't at the top of the top 10. So, it just kind of had flipped with the people they had judging. So, there, as much as you try, there is that subjectivity to it, and you just don't always understand it. And I want to tell another story really, really quick too. I entered a contest. I think it was with the faith-based part of Romance Writers of America. I think it's called Faith, Inspire, and Hope, or something like that. And I entered their contest. And 2 of the judges just, oh my gosh, they loved. I probably would have won it if not for the 3rd judge, honestly. But she gave me such tremendous feedback that when I wrote my thank you notes, and we might want to talk about that too, writing thank you notes to judges. I wrote my thank you notes. And of course, I don't know who the judge is. That goes through the coordinator, and she passes them on. But that person wrote back to me, and we became friends. And she said, I know I kept you from winning. She said, but I just felt like you had so much potential, and I wanted to really, she goes, I did judge you harder than I judged some other people because I felt like there was potential there. So, those kind of things happen too. And honestly, I'm glad that I had that kind of feedback and had that relationship more than winning that contest. So.
Yeah. And like Ben was saying, when you don't know your score, how well, or the feedback could really help you improve.
Yeah.
I entered Writer's Digest has a self-published contest, and I entered that one year, and I was trying to think how much I spent on that. It was more expensive, kind of like what you just did, Vicki. I had they gave us the scoring sheets afterwards and a personal note from one of the judges how much he liked it and stuff like that. And that I didn't win, but it was wonderful feedback. So that's maybe something, as you think about what contest to enter, to look to see if that's part of can you get feedback from that?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that if that's what you're looking for, don't enter a contest that you're not going to get that back on, because then you'll just kind of feel frustrated and disappointed. But one of the ways that I know you can get some feedback on an entry is to get a critique, or to have an agent or an editor or some friends read through it and see, if it doesn't do well in a contest, have somebody else read it and kind of give you some feedback and say what they're thinking. I mean, you can kind of use those 2 things together versus just entering contests that give you feedback. We've tossed around this idea of, adding that in as a feature of the Serious Writer contest in the future. We're going to have to raise prices, and we are trying to keep costs down, so that's why we do it the way we do it right now.
And it adds another layer of complexity, I think, to the whole thing too, which is not always easy to do. I'm just curious, the one that you just entered that Michelle told you about, is it on your current book?
It's on the current book, yes.
So, that is an idea after this book came out not that long ago, right?
Right, April.
April. And so here it is several months afterwards, and you're entering it still. So you could take a book that's been out even for a while and enter it,
Yes.
and maybe give it some new life. Now, this is still pretty young.
Yes. Yes. And so some of that's a great point to bring up. I mean, some of the published categories will have certain dates on them, like for the published category for the upcoming Ohio conference contest. It will be what was published in 2018. So even if it got published this year, it doesn't qualify. It doesn't necessarily. I mean, again, I told you we don't like disqualify everything, but it's not actually, the rules are January to December 2018. And so that's, one thing to keep in mind, because some of them will be very specific about what year they should have been published in. But the one I entered is actually, the one category I entered for Heart and Home had to have been published by, I think it was July 31st, which meant I couldn't submit the Christmas book this time. And so July 31st or previous. So it was kind of a wide.
Well, next year will be the Christmas book.
Yes.
Once you
We'll
win.
see how this year's goes.
You'll win this year, next year. But that Dory made a very good point in the chat too about at Blue Ridge. She read through her friends' entries, so when they won, and they did, she knew what the judges liked. And I think that is an excellent idea, because we know each other, well enough to be able to say, can we read what you submitted, Rhonda? Can we read what you submitted? That sort of stuff, and that's a good.
I did that after Blue Ridge. The first time I went, some of the published books that won, I went back and I ordered them, so that I could read them and see. Again, it was the same kind of ideas, what is winning? It's the research. It's the same thing that we're going to try to do when we're doing our proposals, right? We're trying to do research to see what the market's looking for. And so it's the same thing whenever you're going to do a contest and see what's winning. You can kind of, if somebody, especially if they win the contest more than once, or, something like that, you're going to want to check that out. I mean, there are certain people that win more than one contest regularly. And within Serious Writer, there are people that win more than one contest regularly. Their names come up frequently. So they would be people that I would be like, I need to go see what they're writing. I need to go read what they're doing, and so that I can be successful as well. We want to, those are the mentor texts. We've talked about that a lot.
That's a great tip. And people are talking about the number of the pool. How did Rhonda explain it? That the size of the pool of people entering too. And I don't think we really know that as when we send something in, unless we know a certain contest is huge.
Well, I can tell you one that's consistently huge with Serious Writer is the children's picture books. That one is always flooded with entries, just huge children's picture books. Fiction tends to be a pretty big category, although, we divide it out pretty well. And even North Carolina, we didn't even have enough entries to create our own murder, suspense, thriller category this time. So they ended up getting put into the general. And speculative fiction doesn't necessarily get a bunch. But we've had times where like YA just gets blasted. So it depends, and that's true. How you place, or if you win a category, a lot of times will depend on how many entries there were, and you don't know that ahead of time.
You don't.
Recently, another one of our categories that was huge was devotionals, those short devotionals. I think, we just had 10 or 15 in that one category. So, obviously your odds of winning in a category that's flooded with entries is going to be a lot harder.
But it sounds like, too, if it's one that doesn't have a lot of entries, you might get mushed into a larger category and get even lost.
Yeah, that's true.
A larger category, too. So, you just shoot for the middle.
Yeah, exactly. Find the fair to Midland. Yep.
Yeah, on that way. Well, this has been really good. It's we have about 10, 15 minutes left. I don't know if Johnny and you two want to add something more, and then we can invite people back in to share their experience. Either of you two want to add something more to this topic?
Well, I would recommend that, if that you volunteer to judge, really. I mean, I'm sure that there are places that would love to have you talk to Vicki about doing Serious Writer. to see what her criteria are for a judge. But it is a helpful way to get involved too, and to volunteer your time, and also just see what people are writing and what, what's out there, and do it. We haven't talked about the fear of sending in an entry, and I know it's scary. I mean, I've done it. I know it is, but I'm sorry, that's my computer doing that. Sometimes you just have to take that step and just go for it, even when it's scary.
Yeah. They're asking when Serious Writers Contest, the next contest is, Vicki?
Yeah, so for the Ohio Christian Writers Conference is the next Serious Writer Contest, and let me check real quick.
Because they're asking when does it open, because I think
today.
What did you say?
It's open today.
Ooh. There you go. So, and where would they find that info? Just
OhioChristianWriters.com.
Okay, and that way. And Rhonda says she has an entry ready for it.
All right, very good.
Good for her. That is great. That's great and stuff. Why don't we have everybody come on back in a little bit and join us? Because like I said, we have some winners in our group. If you can't come on back in, let us know. But we have some winners that maybe they might share a little bit of what that experience was like, or a tip that they learned. And I know Rhonda's one for sure. Rhonda, what do you want? I'm going to pick on you to start.
We can't really see it. It's see-through, but this was what they gave me in New York for Writer of the Year. And one thing I would say that has not been said, there's been a lot of good advice here. First of all, if you don't enter, you don't win. Okay, so you've got to enter. And I said in the chat, and I will say again, if any of you here in Writers Chat want to email me, I'll send you my entry that won, so you can read it. It did not win when I entered it in another contest. It got 2 thumbs up and 1 raspberry. So what the judging is subjective, even with this very same piece. But one thing I will say is, well, what happens after you win? Because for me, I was thinking, now I've got all this momentum. It's go, go, go. Well, I came home, I have to finish my book. And I had a great first 15 pages were great, right? And I had edited them again and again and again. But now it's like, okay, now I have to actually finish something. I have 15 pages of like 6 books, and they're really good, and they've won contests. But now I have to focus and finish. And it's the same grunt work. I mean, I pass by the shelf every day that's got this award, but I still have to drag myself into my office and work on it. And it's not done yet. I had to make the decision recently, am I going to try to finish it fast, or am I going to finish it well? And I decided to try to finish it well. And historical fiction takes a long time because there's a lot of research and things. But I also entered both fiction and nonfiction. And that's part of what got me going in this Writer of the Year contest, is because both entries that I made it up, near the top. And they were both finalists. One was fiction and one was nonfiction. So I just tried not to let myself be limited. It is a real boost. I got to tell you, there was some juice when I found out I won. I'll never forget that. I'll just never forget that feeling. I was way out in the boonies somewhere. I could hardly get a cell phone call, but I was laughing and crying and everything all at the same time. But winning an award is great, but you've still got to come home and do the grunt work.
Yeah.
Can I just follow up on that? So for American Christian fiction writers, at some time, it wasn't always like this, but now you have to have the manuscript complete, not necessarily polished, but at least completed, because they were finding out that people were winning or placing, and agents and editors were interested, and there was no manuscript, and that manuscript might not ever get written, So now you have to finish one. And then they also have the second contest, First Impressions, which you do not have to have your manuscript finished for that one. So there's two different contests there. Another thing you need to know is you do the guidelines. I mean, you read the guidelines is what are the criteria, and that is one percent is that the manuscript has to at least be completed, not necessarily polished, but completed, so that if you place, to get going on polishing that thing.
Good point. Very good point. We have some people sharing that Ben just won North Carolina.
Congrats.
He can't wait to get his medal in the mail. And
It's coming.
his nonfiction, All Nature Sings. That sounds really good. On that, and then Carissa won second place at Blue Ridge Sailor Awards. That's for a poem. That is. And Dory won third place at Blue Ridge for flash fiction. So wow,
Awesome.
I told you we had winners here.
We're so proud of all you guys, really. And again, I know it's scary, but it's no fun when you get that feedback from that one judge that sabotages you either. Like I had a judge give me a really low score on punctuation and grammar in one contest, and I will tell you what, no, because I know my punctuation and I know my grammar. So it was just like, but you know what, then it made me discount. I just didn't want to listen. I didn't want to read anything she had to say, because it's like, no. But you can cry, it's fine, cry, put it aside for a day or two, but do go back to it and really ask yourself, what is the legitimacy here? And there probably is, really. There probably is.
I would say too, if you have a really good entry, enter again.
Yeah.
Okay? Because I entered Ravenwood, which won the Writer of the Year award. I entered it in the Blue Ridge contest as well, and it won. We got a mashup. Historical romance, I guess, didn't have enough to have its own category, so I was in with a plain historical fiction, but it still placed second. And all of this goes on my writer's CV, and I'm still in the hunt for an agent. And when you can list wins like that, it gives you some credibility, because they know that professionals have looked at your work and said it's good. It just isn't, Aunt Mildred really loves your book. It's somebody who knows what they're doing.
And I think Rhonda talked about this earlier too, or somebody mentioned it. Maybe it was Jeannie. Just those discouraging times, it's like, it's nice to have those things to look back on too, and to say, okay, I'm not going to give up, because I got this, and yeah, now it looks like really bleak times, nothing's going anywhere, but but those are the milestones, and they can be what just keeps spurring you on, just to not give up, because obviously you did something right, because you won that award or placed or whatever. I mean, it's just good, and those are wonderful milestones to have, because we talk about this all the time. The journey goes up and the journey goes down. I mean, you think you've got it made, and nope, you're just at the crest, and you're going to go right back down again, and then shoot up maybe a little higher next time. I mean, it's not like this.
Yeah. Brandy brought up about honorable mentions too, and I thought that was a very good point. She says those count too. I don't know, Vicki, if you want to say anything about honorable mentions.
Yeah, I mean, if we get serious writer, if we get down to honorable mention and start, given those places, that was a big category. Like, that there was a lot of entries that had to be judged, and so there have been many times where they're 1 point apart, and so you try to give everybody, a placing, but you can't necessarily. And so the next person that's just below the honorable mention might have been 1 point, and so it's hard.
So don't be ashamed of honorable mentions.
No, and I mean, I had a third place win in a contest, and I kind of just put it up, and I was like, oh, well, it's not a first. I don't want to talk about it. And I was really kind of like beat over the head with that one and told that was the wrong attitude to have. And it was, that was a win, and I needed to take it. And it wasn't a win-win, but it was a place. And it was very encouraging. So
I will say, because she's not saying anything, my first contest that I entered, my historical fiction won third place. And the first place winner in that category that I lost out to was Miss Mary Gardner. And she's won several contests. And, you know, I remember talking to Mary afterward. You know, you can make friends sometimes with people who you compete with, and you can learn from each other. And I learned just to keep trying, just to keep trying. If I had given up after that first contest, where would I be?
Yeah.
Exactly.
And Ben talked about the importance of connecting too. He put something in the chat that he figured something had been up. People started sending him friend requests that he didn't know, and he found out that they were writers. So he searched for the results, and he found out he won. He said it was very humbling and validating. And I think that's kind of what we said. It's one of those ups that we need to take and savor as writers on that one.
It can be an up, but back in the day before I took my break from writing, I won the grand prize of a contest. It was a conversation with an editor.
Oh, nice.
And the very first thing that editor said to me was, "You will never be published." He said, "Your entry may have been the best of what I got, but publishable."
Tell me her address, Mary. I want to write her a naughty note.
She's deceased now, so no one will ever talk to her again. But that was her version of encouragement. So, you know, and it was one of those things that it does put it in perspective. I may be good enough in the group that was entered, but that does not mean that I'm at a level where a publisher will take it on.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's something that I do keep in mind, even when I win first place, is this good enough? And I still enter a contest because it is that boost. But it also, she put that in a real, it was a very harsh conversation, but it was real.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just because you win first place, an editor isn't going to come knocking on your door.
Yeah, because not every contest judges marketability, right? I mean, sometimes a story's great and you love it, and you know it's really strong and the writing's good, but maybe there's just an oversaturation, you know, in the market. So, you know, that is a great point, and it's hard to hear because you know we want our babies that win to also.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it was Carissa, somebody asked about, no, it was Brandy, about small contests. And I think it's kind of a lot what we said. First of all, if you got some feedback, and two, they probably count a little bit, but then in lieu of what Mary said, they may not count enough, you know. They're stepping stone, at least, I would say.
They're training grounds. I mean, you know, you can start out there and then move up as you understand what's required and what you need to do and all those kinds of things. And yeah, I would not discount them. I would enter any contest you felt led.
I've also judged contests, especially on the romance writing contests. I've judged them. And sometimes they are pretty hard to judge because they're first efforts. Peers. I've judged both of the, actually I've judged in all three of the American Christian Fiction Writers contest. And some of them are great, and some of them really are going to need work. And it's trying to figure out, how do you say to the author, let's keep writing, but this isn't quite where it needs to be. And I judged one, and that I simply said, this looks like a first effort, and it's really good, but you need to continue to work on it.
Yeah.
And I've learned more from judging contests than I've learned from entering.
It's sort of what we.
I will say too.
I would.
The very first time, and then I'm going to hush. The very first time I pushed enter on a contest, it was so scary. And the more contests I've entered, now I'm a lot more confident when I'm sending something even to an agent or an editor. You know, that because pushing that submit button is just terrifying. And the more you do it, the easier it gets. And I think you reach further when you reach higher.
Yeah.
Josh, I think Josh was
Josh, were you going to add something as we finish up here?
Not any value. I was just going to say, it was sort of a question and a statement, is when we were just talking about the different levels of the contests, like, I guess I always question what it means when, like, you see so many authors who put, you know, award-winning author in their bio. Like, is there some standard for what that means? Because, like, I won the Young Authors Contest in 3rd grade for my rousing nonfiction My Own Snoopy, but I don't put award-winning author in my bio, and I'm just wondering, like, how do you like measure what that means?
Anybody want to respond to that? I don't
put
think
that in my bio, but I put it in there because Where Treasure Hides did win the Genesis contest, and in our inspirational world, that's a pretty big deal. So,
Yeah, and I'm not trying to be disrespectful to
no,
people
I know
who put
you're
that.
not.
That's not what
I know you're not. But yes, I mean, it could be. I mean, I feel like Rhonda could put that in hers because she won the Serious Writer of the Year award, and I know that there was stiff competition in that because I judged some of those, and it was, you know, yeah, they were very good entries. So, but yeah, you know, you kind of do have to follow it up and see. If you've won a Christie, if you've won a Carol, if you've won, you know, the Genesis, I think those are very legitimate ways to say award winning.
I think an editor or if you had that in your bio and an editor or an agent sees award winning, they're going to figure out pretty quickly what was that award in. And if it was 3rd grade.
If it's a proposal, though, you're going to have those. I mean, you're going to have, you know,
Right.
have what those awards are so that they can see that. And the
Yeah.
same
It's just I see that everywhere, so I was just wondering, like, what's the standard for that?
I don't
if you feel comfortable putting it in your bio, I think it's
I'll tell you
and
what
I just wanted to quickly, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rhonda.
I was going to say, I always say which award it was in what place.
Yeah.
And that makes me feel better that I'm being completely honest. And if that impresses them, great. If it doesn't, well, okay.
Good point.
And then I just wanted to ask Vicki really quick. You mentioned the Serious Writer Award at the Ohio. Did you say that you do not have to be present to enter that?
You do not.
Because I have a speaking engagement that weekend, so.
Yeah, absolutely. You can still enter. You don't have to be there, and we judge it just the same.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
If you win, Josh, I'm going to be there. I'll cheer for you.
Oh, thank you.
Me too. I'll cheer for you.
I have a question. As an unpublished writer, I've announced different placements and all this on Facebook and on social media. But then I have local people come up to me and say, well, what have you published? And I said, well, I'm not published. And one woman said, well, how could you win an award if you're not published? And I said, well, it's for unpublished people. Does anyone have a polite answer for that?
Let me tell you about the publishing industry. Educated. Because they make the assumption of that, you know.
They do. And it's, I've had several people, and it's just kind of uncomfortable.
It is.
I tell you, part of that is internal, Mary. But part of it for me, when people say, oh, when's your book being published? And I don't have an agent, I don't have a contract or anything. I say, look, I'm on a writing journey. And if there's anything I've learned about this, every step matters. And it's a long journey. So hang in there with me. If you'd like to see what I wrote, I'll let you see what I wrote, and you can tell me what you think. But ultimately, I'm on a journey, and I'm pursuing a goal, and I'm getting closer every day.
Good.
And people who don't understand what this life is like, and I was one of them at one time. And that's the other thing. I just have to forgive them because they're just ignorant. They don't mean evil. They're just ignorant.
But you could use that opportunity to increase your newsletter subscribers, because then you could say, well, I haven't, it's in the works and I would love to share that with you. How about if you sign up for my newsletter? Go here.
I love that.
Right?
I love that too.
Perfect.
Yeah.
It's the only thing I have, Jean. It's the
Perfect. And what a neat way to finish, because we're running long here. So we went on that. Christy, I think that is a perfect way. Positive. Vicki, thank you. we'll be sure and tell everybody in what was it, September, the next one comes out?
That's right. Well, the new one, the new book comes out in September. The next contest is open now, and the deadline would be October 18th.
Okay. We get those in. And Johnny?
Next week, we are doing Pick the Brains of the Author. So we are asking you to submit questions on the Facebook group or on the Facebook page, or to Melissa, who I think is sort of coordinating the questions. And we're just going to kind of have an open mic being asked questions, and we're going to do our best to answer them. So whatever you think we can answer.
A round table discussion on a lot of things.
I don't even know who all the authors are going to be who are
we don't know, you know, but
we'll see.
some things that you would like to see us discuss, that sometimes some of the questions don't take a whole hour, so we thought we'd do a potpourri of questions.
Yeah,
so,
and it's Labor Day weekend, and we didn't know who all would even be there, so or coming up, I guess. So anyway, that's what we're gonna do. We hope you join us again.
And it may only be 10 minutes long, and so it'll be a short. Oh, no, I bet this group will talk on that way. So thank you, everybody, for joining with us today. If you're watching the replay, we're really glad you stayed with us and stuff. And enter those contests. See you next week. Thanks again, Vicki.
Thanks, Vicki. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.